the disconnection that happens and that exists, it really is only harming the whole of us. Even if we have differing beliefs, disconnection is harmful. And when we are connected while having differing beliefs, we as a small community are extremely powerful. We can make big impact. We can develop wellness, which is more loving attitudes and actions.
Welcome to Shaping the Basin. I am here with Shuina Sko.
Yes.
I first learned of you because a friend of mine on Facebook shared one of your poems, and I was moved by it. Mm-hmm. And I thought she might be an interesting guest after I stalked you a little bit on social media. So thank you for giving me the time today.
Definitely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I thought rather than me attempting to introduce you, would you introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes, definitely. So being an Indigenous person, I first am enrolled in the Klamath Nation, the Klamath tribes, which these are our homelands. And how we introduce ourselves traditionally is by first saying who we are and then who we come from. We typically do this because we want to know how we're connected and how to move forward in relationship. It's just like we do live in a small town, right? So it's just like if you bump into someone in the grocery store and they're like, oh, I think I know your mother or your sister or I knew your grandparents. And however they know your family is kind of how you're perceived, right? That's their initial perception of you. So it's really important. And this is the same thing that happens in the Native community. So we're trying to establish connection immediately. So to introduce myself, I will first say, Dwan Nepka, what's happening? That's not really necessary. I just like to say it. But Dwan Nepka, what's happening? Gawasas is Shuina Sko. My name is Shuina Sko. Let's see. My mother. So this is a part of telling you who I come from. My mother is Camille Delorme. Her mother is Teresa Wright Delorme, whose mother is Mary Silvers Wright, whose mother is Esther Hart Silvers, whose father is Lionheart, whose father is Chinchelo Mukas, one of the signers of our treaty in 1864. Now, I introduce myself in this way because if you noticed, it follows my mother's lineage and my grandmother and her mother and so on, because we're a matriarchal people. We were then and we are still today. And I end with the treaty signer because that was a time in our history that significantly changed the route of our life and every generation after that. So that's part of my story. And I know that each one of us carries a story. So I'm also going to add this. I started off by saying Dwan Nepka, and this is a Klamath word. It's 2 words, Dwa and Nepka. And how I learned this phrase was when I was a child, a really small child. I was sitting in a group of other children, and we were listening to our elder teach us our language. And when the elder got to this word, he said, with this one, you gotta lean way back in your chair. And you say it like this. Dwanepka. That means what's happening. So I have remembered that ever since. I share that to say, not only in our introductions, we share pieces of ourselves and the pieces that are very important to us to build connection. But when that elder taught us our language, I became a carrier of our language. I became a carrier of that story. And when I share that, I'm inviting you to become a carrier of a part of my story. And through that exchange, through our exchange of just knowing each other, bumping into each other, that brief exchange, we become more connected and we are forever changed moving forward. And it could potentially not only be just us, but our children and their children and so on.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
What?
So that's my introduction.
How
That has
the
nothing
heck
to
do I go from there?
That has
Gosh,
nothing to do with poetry. So
no, I love it.
I'm also a poet.
Yeah, well, the way you said it was poetic, so that makes sense. But talk to me about that is really beautiful. Talk to me about what you do. So you are a poet. You are an artist.
Yes.
You're an author.
I am.
You teach workshops.
Yes.
Talk to me about that.
So notice all of these things. If we put it as pieces of an umbrella, right? And the tip of that umbrella, the top of it is connection, is storytelling. And that's kind of how I started with connection and storytelling in my introduction, and also with the story about how I learned the word Dwanepka. And I have many other stories about how I learned certain words, but something so small can lead to a really impactful story. And art is the same way. And it doesn't matter what form of art you're in, it's all storytelling, and it's all a means to connection. And that's so important to me. So I like to tell story through spoken word poetry, and through doing so and sharing it through workshops and presentations, the feedback I received afterward when I would do presentations and add some poetry in there to make it more fun, they would want copies of these poems. And for being a spoken word poet, and an artist, I'm like, okay, how am I going to present this poem on paper? Because I don't want it to just be like, okay, let me send you an email. Here's the words of the poem. I wanted to make it a pretty PDF. And that's how I got started putting my poetry onto paper. And the more requests I received to have my poetry shared, the more I realized that I just need to put it all in one place. And so I taught myself the ins and outs of formatting and editing and creating a book. And then after that, how to publish. So there's traditional publishing, there's self-publishing, and what's the best route for me? And because I'm an artist and I want to have control over the art and, be expressive in that way, me and the people who were supporting me, because I didn't do it alone, people who are helping me edit, my words and making sure I didn't have spelling errors and things like that, decided to go the self-publishing route. And so that's how I became interested in creating books. And so I've written several poetry books with various themes. And more recently, I created a children's book.
Yeah. Tell me, there's so many things I want to talk about, but tell me about the children's book.
The children's book. So I have a passion in telling story. And since I come from the Klamath Nation, I was born and raised here on my homelands. I was born and raised within and with my traditional ways of being and knowing. So that means out in the woods and doing various things. Anyway, the children's book came to be because I love my community. I love children. I love families. I have a background in social services, so I know the impact of connection and the impact of disconnection. And what I took on last school year, so school year 2024 to 2025, was a renovation project of the Chiloquin Junior High / high school library. And I stepped into the library noticing that it needed to be updated. And because the population is over half Native students, there was a huge need for cultural and diverse materials. And so I renovated the library. Thank you to the principal who gave me the freedom to do that. It was a powerful project. I did a 6-foot by 30-foot mural to just make it really inviting. And I use my hands a lot. Spoken word poetry is about performance as well. And But anyways, through that process, I realized there is such a huge need for diverse authors to create content for their communities and for that content to be widely available. What I know to be true about the Klamath Nation and the Klamath tribes, made up of the Klamath, Modoc, and Yehuskin Paiute people, Northern Paiute people, also known as Snake people. And what I know to be true is that we definitely need more materials, more culturally relevant, more culturally accurate materials that are interactive, that are exciting and inviting for our children and families. So I love the stories that have been passed down to us generation after generation. One of them is a story about grizzly bear. And I thought I can meet this need by creating a story about grizzly bear that is inspired by the original story that we passed down. And I could put it in a book that is inviting to children today. And that way we can still share our culture. We can still tell these children that you are seen, you are valued, and you come from wonderful, powerful, healthy people. And that's who you are. I wanted to speak to who they are. And that's kind of how it came to be. I also did the illustrations, and that was extremely difficult. I thought it wouldn't be because, I have a background in art just naturally. I'm not formally taught, but it is a journey to illustrate a book. And so I just honor all of the illustrators out there and admire them so much more. But, yeah.
It was a process. I'm curious, did you go to high school in Chiloquin?
So my childhood was being in Chiloquin and Klamath. So I spent time in Chiloquin as a child, going to Chiloquin Elementary School. And then I moved to Klamath Falls area. I went to Ponderosa, and then I went to Klamath Union High School, graduated. And then, although I spent time in Klamath, I told you I'm born and raised, with my culture. And so we did spend a lot of time outside of Klamath, and my summers were spent basically camping near the marsh and just out in the woods along the river, and building sweat lodges, things like this, fishing, hunting. But I did go to Ponderosa. I did go to KU, and then I joined the military because when you're from a small town, sometimes there's a part of some people, not all of us, but there's a part of me and some other people perhaps that kind of want to escape or get away. And so that's what I did with the military. And then it kind of, it changed my life in a really wonderful way. Mm-hmm. And then I came back for college.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I was just curious. I don't know what Chiloquin High School looked like before, but is the renovations that you made in the library, is it some of the first renovations that highlight the culture at Chiloquin High School?
My answer is no. So Chiloquin High School is just like any other school. It goes through phases of development, given whatever decade we're in and whoever is supporting that school at the time. So Chiloquin High School, what I kind of noticed is maybe every generation, so maybe every 20 years, it seemed to undergo some type of renovation. And with the library itself, I didn't do any physical renovations. So I didn't necessarily, I moved some shelves. I did move some things around, but ultimately shelving stayed the same, windows, doors stayed the same, things like that. It was mostly with the books, the materials, and how they were placed, how they were positioned, and the artwork and things like this. But there's been renovations that have happened. I think during our time, I noticed in the last 20 years, it seemed that there wasn't significant changes happening to the materials that were in that library. And if we're talking about children today learning from books 20 years ago, and the average book age was almost half a century ago. So that means in all areas, the sciences, in all sciences, they're not being supported in the best ways for tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Right? And so it wasn't only a cultural renovation to support Indigenous children or even just diversity in all its forms. It was also a spotlight on the need for new science books and new materials made in poetry and stuff like that. And it was just, genre wide.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm glad you clarified that. Where does your creative drive come from?
It's something that I was born with. As a child, I sketched. I did a lot of sketching. That's how I spent my free time. And so no matter where I was always sketching. And then that developed into painting. And so there was a time where I lived in California for a bit and I was selling my paintings at, street fairs and stuff like that. And then while I was in California I love art in all forms. And so I'd go to open mic nights. And when I was doing open mic nights, that's when I was exposed to spoken word poetry, because being from a small town and kind of, being sheltered in a sense. And I was a person who didn't travel. This was my home and this is where I was comfortable. And so I really wasn't exposed to a lot. So when I was exposed to spoken word poetry, that was a different form of art. And it was just intriguing. So my artistic abilities and my interests and my passion for all things art just came from my DNA. My grandmother was a fantastic artist. My mother's mother, just incredible. And I think when she was like 15 or 16, my mother has a small painted canvas that has a bird, but it's just so detailed, and you would think that it's a professionally trained artist that was definitely well into their adulthood, and it just has me in awe. And so I'm not sure where it comes from, but I know that my mother's mother was an artist, and perhaps I carry that gene too.
Well, and I'm making an assumption here because I don't know this, but I'm guessing that handing down stories and spoken words are part of the culture.
Yes.
That you come from.
Yes.
Can you share a story that has been handed down to you that is really stands out to you?
Let's see. So I'm going to share the story of the grizzly bear. Okay. So there are many, many stories that circulate in our tribe and within families. And I just want to preface this by saying that the Klamath people, the tribe is three very separate tribes that came together during the treaty signing. And I come from Klamath people and only the Klamath people. And I don't speak for all people, because even the Klamath nation, the Klamath people, we were not one cohesive unit with a bunch of members, but we were big families that were kind of broken up and made home in different areas along the lake, along the rivers, the Williamson, the Sprague, along the marsh. And there's, we're in a land of water, right? So there's several marshes and lakes during that time. So to tell you the grizzly bear story isn't to say this is a story of that everyone carries, but it's a story that I know. And I will share that a long time ago, not that long, but a while ago, there was a grizzly bear family. And there was Klamath people, and we were all family. And at that time, we would all swim in the river. Every summer, we'd come out, the grizzly bear family and the human family, the Klamath families, and we'd swim together. Well, this one Klamath person saw that the child of the grizzly was playing alone, and this Klamath person decided to take the grizzly. For whatever reason, it's unknown, but that grizzly bear was not returned to the grizzly parents. And so the grizzly parent searched and searched for their child, and they couldn't find their child anywhere. And they became frantic and scared and worried and afraid for their child. And they went to the Klamath people because now they knew that it was a Klamath person who took the grizzly. And they said to the Klamath people, "How can you take one of my children? Because we've swam together, we're family. How could you do this to us?" And the Klamath person who took the little grizzly was basically got in trouble, was not really welcomed for that act. It was very not okay act. So they basically were not necessarily shunned from the community, but it was known that it was not okay to do that. And the rest of the Klamath people, they apologized, and Grizzly, the parent, became very upset because whenever they confronted a Klamath person, the Klamath person would get scared now of Grizzly's energy, and they would try to harm Grizzly. And then that's where the back and forth happened of Grizzly now becoming a threat to people and people now becoming a threat to the animals. And so in that, the people chose to kill Grizzly, and it was more of a safety thing. It wasn't out of vengeance or aggression, but it was more of a safety thing. And they carried Grizzly's fur, hide. I'm not sure what a grizzly bear's fur is called. But anyways, they carried grizzly bear's fur with them, and they passed that down from generation to generation with this story saying that it's not okay to take things that aren't yours, and it's really important to honor the animals that we're in relationship with. And so it's a story of respect, it's a story of honor, and it's a story of values and morals. And so that's the story that we carry, is that when we respect others and respect animals and appreciate the relationship that we have, we stay in harmony and on both ends. But when we don't, that's where the disharmony, disconnect, and the safety issues come up.
I actually want to talk about that a little bit in relation to our community.
Sure.
Can we talk about that? I don't know if it's okay to talk about this.
We should. And
I don't know.
I am a voice for myself. I represent myself.
Yes. No, I love that. And I am here just because I'm curious.
Okay.
And I like to learn from people. But our community sometimes feels very divided, going back a long time.
Sure.
And I think there's an important lesson in the grizzly bear story you told about how us humans could do that a little bit better.
Yes.
How could we do that better?
How could we do that better?
Yeah. How could we do that better? How could we use the grizzly bear lesson to be better with each other?
Well, to speak from a traditional perspective, we are first spirit beings. And to recognize, that's how we recognize grizzly as well. Our animal relations, our plant relations, we recognize them first and ourselves as spirit beings. And when we recognize ourselves as spirit beings, we value that connection. And to have a Klamath perspective, an Indigenous perspective, we see things as cyclical and as cycles, and how one thing impacts another thing, and nothing is separate, but we have impact in all things we do or choose not to do. And so what I know to be true is that regardless of who you are, who you're from, what culture, what nationality, no matter the difference, is that when we look at each other as spirit beings, when we look in each other's eyes, when we see past any difference that exists, you start valuing that person immediately. And then if we start some of the traditional practices, right, of introducing ourselves in a traditional way. So when we start leading with practices that build connection, we almost immediately shift the trajectory of how we move forward from that moment. So for me, I would say how we make change and how we shift is by going back to practices that lead to deep connection and harmony in the moment and that carry on through generation. And so I would say, look at whoever is in front of you as a spirit being, search for their soul, search for their essence, and you'll see their value. And then get curious about their story. And we could initiate that by sharing who we come from and start practicing more of a traditional way of introducing ourselves. So for example, the moment we meet, I can look at you. If we're strangers, we're standing in line in the grocery store, a long line, because you might need a little bit of time for this. But I see your soul, I see your spirit, and that's with intention, right? So I don't know who you are, where you come from, what your background is, your ethnicity at all, because culture is complex, ethnicity is complex. But I first intentionally do that. So it takes intention. And then I can introduce myself and say, this is who I am, this is who I come from. And who are you? What makes your story special? Was there a major shift in your family story that impacts you and every generation after you? And then I just get curious and interested about you. And so when we establish connection, it's hard then to see each other as enemies, or it's hard for our differences to stand out. And when they stand out, we already have that foundation of connection, that slight building of trust already and comfort. So we start basically having more compassion for each other initially. And then clearly we'd move forward in a more harmonious, meaningful connection relationship. So the next time I see you in that grocery store, we aren't going to be strangers. We might not know everything about each other, but we might look at each other pleasantly. Mm-hmm. And, maybe if you're on an opposite side of an issue that comes up in Klamath County, I'll see you as a person. I'll see you as a spirit being first. And whoever you're attached to and whatever your beliefs are, I'll know that they're pieces of you and they're not the whole of you, because I already got to experience a piece of you that was wonderful. That was good. That was harmonious.
It's easy to get lost. Don't know which path to take, what to post. In the social media jungle, video is king. Your kids are obsessed, your customers are addicted, we're all hooked, and social media sites prioritize videos. So when you're ready to stand out from the crowd, reach out to 40 Deuce Films. Feeling over everything.
You've talked about growing up traditional and the value of connection
Yes.
and things like that. Can we talk a little bit about the role of connection to the past and the culture in the future of? Do you get where I'm coming
I don't
from?
know. I don't know. Let's see. The role of connection.
Do you feel like connection was lost a little bit in the tribe? Was there a period of time when feeling connected to ancestors and traditions and language and all of that was maybe not emphasized or was taken away?
So, as a tribal person, raised in the way I was and with the family that I have, my answer is no. So I have two answers, right? Because I understand what you're asking. But as a Native person, I was born as a Klamath, an Eoxney person. That means person of the Marsh Lake Rivers. And that is who I am. And so to be born and to be raised and all of that and to learn my language and not be fluent in it is to know my culture, know my people. So for me to say I had a disconnection to it, it was suppressed or oppressed in certain ways, like I have always been connected. Now at the level that I was connected, it shifts, especially when we're talking about my mother's generation or her mother's generation. So that there are differences there. So my answer is no, and especially to every Klamath, Modoc, Northern Paiute person, I will say that no matter what, because you exist, you are culture. You are the embodiment of our culture, no matter what that looks like. Your DNA is beautiful. It's every component of every ancestor you've ever had. And it's the most beautiful, strong, powerful pieces of your ancestors. So culture exists and will always exist as long as we exist. Mm-hmm. And my second answer to that is absolutely. Yes, there's been major impact to aspects of our culture, specifically our language. And when we're talking about connection to each other, that has presented. And there's various moments in our history that have really impacted those areas. So if we go back to the early 1800s when non-Indigenous people from the area started showing up and we started understanding different ways of being through trading tangible things, trading stories, that made an impact because whenever we have any new experience, that's going to shift how we perceive the world and how we perceive others and each other. So early 1800s, and then we skip forward to 1864, treaty signing, that shifted everything. And then we skip forward a little bit later, maybe 1880s, and we look at my community being in a specific location, the reservation. And if we hear reservation often, but more often it's like a concentration camp. So it's a way to contain people with limited resources. And so that shifts everything, right? And then we move into boarding schools where Indigenous children are removed forcefully, whether that's physically or through mentally harmful tactics, and taken into boarding schools where they were not allowed to speak their language, where these were not just schools to learn and to expand the mind and ability, but they were basically more like training camps. So like little boot camps. So they raised military children. They wanted workers and laborers. And so it was a school for a child to learn how to become more of a laborer and basically guide them into a military lifestyle. So that was huge because all of their children were going to be impacted by their parenting. And so when you have a lot of children who do not have parents, who do not receive love, affection, healthy, physical attention, that were now basically for the first time experiencing physical and sexual abuse. And then you have little vulnerable children that they don't understand how to parent those children. And oftentimes they carry a fear of, if I teach this child my language, they're going to be physically harmed or killed, just like what they experienced. And so a lot of the language wasn't passed down. And so that's getting into more of the early 1900s. We're also talking about a wave of Native people going into the military, not only just because they were trained to go in the military, but also because military service at that time was a way to get citizenship, because, again, the development of America, Natives didn't have citizenship at that time. So all of these things are pieces of disconnection from our traditional, our ancestral ways of being. But that doesn't mean we are disconnected from our spirit, ourselves, our ancestors. It means our ways of being are being shifted in major, major ways. And then we go forward into basically like 50s, 60s era where little newborn babies are being taken from their mothers in the hospital and being adopted out. So there's this huge move by those in the government and just in the church and religious areas to adopt Native children, because we're still in the process of colonization, still in the process of assimilation. And so instead of necessarily taking them, putting them in boarding school, we're taking Native children and putting them in non-Native homes. And it goes on and on. So yeah. And then in the 70s, that's where a lot of laws that talk about equitable rights or equality in diversity, whatever that is, like those laws came to be. One of them was the Indian Child Welfare Act that happened in 1978, because so many children were being removed from their homes from Native communities. In some communities, it was over 50% of their kids. So if you and I had children, one of our sets of children would be removed from the community. That's wild. That's crazy. And of course that would impact the community hugely. So that law came into being to say that, to basically give more protections to Native children, because they were, through generations and laws and stuff, they were being unjustly targeted, and there was a heavy bias there too. And then, and then we continue. So there's also the termination era. So the Klamath tribes was once one of the wealthiest tribes in all of America. It's talked about as being the second most wealthy, self-sustaining tribes, which is really incredible, really impactful. It speaks to the spirit that we carry, which, is still present today. But in 1954, there was a Termination Act that it was presented in the federal government as being a really positive thing. Like, we as a government people don't want to have a heavy hand over your community, so we're terminating you from our care. And what that means is that at that time, they were saying, you're no longer Native, you have no special or separate identity from us, you are just a people. And that was interesting, because all of the other efforts that came into place to assimilate us and to disconnect us and to harm our communities, put us in such a vulnerable position in society. And to say that you no longer have your community, you are just another person when racism still exists, it was incredibly harmful to the spirit of a person, to the identity of a Native person. And it added to our vulnerability. And so that went on until the 1980s. And restoration happened for our tribe in 1986, I believe. And so that's when the federal government basically restored the treaty agreement without restoring the land, because our success, our wealth came from the natural resources and timber and logging here. And so termination took everything, all of our resources, any access to wealth that we had, and restoration kept that, but said, we can still hunt, we can still fish, we can still gather, but we don't have access to any of the resources that allowed us to be self-sufficient. Mm-hmm. And so since the late 80s and 90s, there's been development of our economy, and various moves in that area to grow in that way, to support our identities, to support connection with community, whether that's just with Indigenous people, but also to support our connections with the broader community. But there have been a lot of harms that we've experienced and that we didn't ask for, but we had to navigate through. And that right now, presently, we are still navigating. And I think our focus is reconnection and harmony and moving forward together within our community and the broader community, non-Indigenous people, so that we can just move forward in the best way as spirit beings, as human beings, for everybody. We are community. We are family. Mm-hmm. We share resources, and I think that's where the focus is right now.
Yeah, we're running a little long. I've got so many more questions, but I want to bring it back a little bit to what you do. So sure. In that work where you are right now, yes. Why does art and your stories and the work that you're doing matter to that?
My art and stories matter to connection. It matters to me because I know that the core of us is hungry for wellness and is hungry for creativity, is hungry for connection. So in everything I do that's creative or artistic or in presentations and workshops, anything, it all is centered on wellness. And I believe that when we are more well, when we're out of survival mode in whatever capacity, when we are well and have wellness practices available to us, that we are more powerful, more bright, more able to love and support each other. And especially in smaller communities like ours, it's a huge need. The disconnection that happens and that exists, it really is only harming the whole of us. Even if we have differing beliefs, disconnection is harmful. And when we are connected while having differing beliefs, we as a small community are extremely powerful. We can make big impact. We can develop wellness, which is more loving attitudes and actions. And that's beautiful. And I hope that our children are going to experience that or experiencing that more than my generation or the generations after me. And I really hope that we move forward experiencing more love and more connection while also holding differing beliefs. And that is okay.
I love that.
Thank you.
I think that seems like a great place. I have lots more to ask, but I think that seems like a good place for this episode to end on. I will, with your permission, put some information in the comments when we release this episode so that people know how to reach you or get involved in the things that you're doing or see your work, if that's okay.
That'd be great. And all I did during this episode is talk about connection. So it goes without saying that I am very open to it. So please reach out and let me be open to you and let me be welcoming to you.
That has been my experience because I did not know you and we had coffee and then you said yes. And I'm very thankful for that. Thank you for giving me your time and sharing your stories with me.
Definitely. Thank you also.
A couple questions I ask everybody. So if I gave you $250,000 to make a difference in our community, what would you do with it?
$250,000, it seems like a lot of money, but when we're talking about certain projects, it can go by really quick and it might not be enough. But there are two things that I would love to do very separate. So I'd need $500,000. But anyways, one of them is creating a children's museum. I know we already have something like that here on Main Street, which is fantastic. Love it. Needed. The children's museum that I'm thinking of would be culturally centered, culturally based, not only with the Indigenous cultures that exist here in the basin, the Klamath, Modoc, Paiute, but also the cultures that built the society that we know today. So, for example, my great-great-grandfather is Portuguese from Portugal. And so that's an interesting culture. And where along the line did that culture kind of fade? And same thing with any other culture. We as Native people have been here. We carry culture, so that would be very present in this place. And I want it to be very interactive. That's how children learn, feel seen, valued, discover. It's powerful, gain ability. But also, if you're non-Native, you are from some culture. You are from a place. And where in your family maybe did that disconnect happen? And if it didn't, let's honor that. And so I would love a children's museum centered and rooted in culture, not in all the cultures. Maybe, perhaps not all. We carry so many, but in some different cultures to really elevate that platform and start sharing pieces of who we are as a community. And then the other one would be a scholarship program that really helps people become empowered as small business owners and entrepreneurs, because in our changing climate from the industrial era into just wherever we're at right now is really to utilize our skill set, our creativity, and to benefit community. I think that would be huge to really support the entrepreneurial spirit in each one of us, and help support small business, because that I believe would really, really benefit the Klamath Basin, Klamath County.
It's the Chamber of Commerce. I can get behind that one as well. I like those. Both of those are good ideas. Do you have a role model?
I have several role models. I don't even have a number one, but a couple people that I admire are my mother, born and raised here. She was on tribal council when she was younger. She's an elder now in our community. And she's a fantastic example of going through difficult times and rising from them and being incredibly resilient, strong, graceful, and kind. I admire her. I love her. She's fantastic, and thank goodness that I have her as a mother. I also, in the same way, admire people like author and activist Bell Hooks. That's no longer with us. You could search her up. That's what she went by, Bell Hooks. She's a fantastic activist, and for diversity and in various areas. And then I also love Maya Angelou because she is a poet and she comes from struggle herself, and she's a beautiful, powerful person, and I love that she shares story and invites connection and really centers that in her work as well. And she's since passed. And I can go on and on. These are people I admire. They're not people I idolize, but yes.
Oh, I like it. I'm really like, which question do I want to ask next? But I'm going to ask this. Would you share one piece of poetry with us?
Oh, gosh.
And if that puts you on the spot, I have a second question I can ask you instead.
I'll share a piece of poetry.
Okay, please.
I haven't shared this in a long time. It's a little bit longer.
Okay.
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 I know we're on a time crunch.
All right.
Okay. I am a rose. I'm an incredibly vibrant rose with petals forever reaching toward the sun, and out so wide they almost touch each ocean that hugs Turtle Island, aka North America. Let's see. And out so wide they almost touch each ocean that hugs Turtle Island. I am a warrior rose, protected by thorn armor. Some of my thorns were gifted to me by my ancestors. Other thorns were grown by me as a way to survive. See, being indigenous is like being a rose within a rose bush, both fully independent, yet also fully connected to the whole, the tribe. If a rose is removed from its rose community, it'll surely die. If an indigenous child is taken from their community, their cultural identity will surely die. If enough indigenous members are removed from our community, our sovereignty will surely die. I am a rose. We all are. I have beautiful petals. We all do. I was born with thorns. We all were. And our ancestors gave us their thorns for a reason. Protection. So that we might avoid being taken. See, sometimes our thorns hurt others intentionally, keeping them away and at a safe distance. I used to end relationships when I felt like they were getting too close. Sometimes our thorns hurt others accidentally, as unhealed trauma, when triggered unexpectedly, immediately hijacks our frontal lobe, putting us into survival mode to protect ourselves, but also blinding us to the needs of anyone else. I used to get so angry without knowing why or how to control it. See, sometimes we use our thorns and we turn them against ourselves. I used to drink and drink until I numbed every inch of myself. Many of my relatives have talked to me about wanting to kill themselves. Could you imagine your little cousin wanting to kill himself? I wonder, who hasn't thought of wanting to hurt themselves? And then I remind myself that our thorns, they're only a piece of us. And even though our thorns might always be with us, we can learn to protect ourselves in healthy ways by establishing boundaries and maintaining them each day. I tell myself, and I'm telling you now too, that we are beautifully indigenous with vibrant petals, forever growing impact far reaching, and we are never alone. We are more than surviving. I promise that whatever we go through, that we can do this. We can easily get through this because we are warrior roses. Subketcha, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for your time.
Yes, thank you to you as well.
You made me cry. Thank you to our producer, 40 Deuce Films.